It's now time to also work on the other routes and not just get routes. For example, let's make sure a new place can be added. Still, for the moment, only a dummy place, which is then stored in memory basically, but better than nothing. So let's add a post route. For that, let's go to the places routes file and add a new middleware here with post, because I want to filter for post requests only. And the path should be /nothing, because the idea is that any request, any post request that targets /API/places and which therefore reaches my places routes automatically reaches this route here. So just /nothing is the filter here. And then in there, I need a controller function to which I can point. So here in places controller, let's add a new function, create place, sounds like a fitting name. And this will be a default middleware function which gets a request object, a response object, and this next function which we can call. And of course, I want to export it here so that we can reference it from another file. I'll set exports create place equal to create place, so to a pointer at this function. Now in places routes, we can point at this new function, places controller create place. And we're done in this file. Now in places controller, we now need to fill this with some life. And now it gets a bit more tricky. Before, we always had the data we needed in the URL, like here, the user ID which we got from the params in the URL. Now for a post request, I expect to have data in the body of the post request. Because whilst GET requests don't have a request body, post requests do. And you do encode the data you want to send with a post request into that post request body. Now to get data out of the body, we can use a package we learned about earlier, the body parser. So we want to add a new middleware. And we want to add that before the request reaches the places routes, because the middlewares will be parsed from top to bottom. So you want to first parse the body and then reach the routes where you need the body. So here we will add body parser. And now I want to parse for JSON data. Before in the refresher, we used URL encoded data to be able to work with that form data. Here I need JSON. This will parse any incoming request body and extract any JSON data which is in there, convert it to regular JavaScript data structures like objects and arrays, and then call next automatically so that we reach the next middleware in line, which are our own custom routes, and then also add this JSON data there. So in the places controller in create place, we'll now be able to get the parsed body. And we get it on a request body property. Now here I will use object destructuring, which is a default modern JavaScript feature, which Node.js supports, to get different properties out of request body and store it in constants, which are then available in the function. And here I'm interested in the title, the description, let's say the coordinates. It's up to us what we expect as data on the incoming request. Here I expect these fields, and the address as well as the creator. These are the fields I expect on the incoming request. And this object destructuring here really is just a shortcut for doing this for every property. So now here we're extracting data from the incoming request. For the moment, we just rely on the fact that all this data will be there. Later, we'll add validation to make sure it really is. But for the moment, let's just assume that we always get the right data. And now I want to create a new place. I'll name it created place, and I'll create an object literal here. We could create a class for a place to use it as a blueprint. But since we'll replace this later anyways with some MongoDB logic, we can leave it like this as an object literal for the moment. Now in that created place, I want to have a title, which I'll map to the value I extracted here into this title constant. And since the name is equal, we can use this shortcut. Same for description. Coordinates is not the same. Here I want to have a location key because I have a location key up there too. And that then holds an object with lat and lng. And I expect that coordinates is such an object with let and lng. So we'll store coordinates in the location property. And then address will be stored in a address property, so we can use that shortcut again. And the same for creator. Now that created place can be added to our dummy places, for example with the push method or with the unshift method if you would want to add it as the first element. Here I will add it as a last element with push. And thereafter we can send back a response. Here I want to set the status code to 201, which is a standard status code you send back if something was successfully created on the server. 200 is your normal success status code. If you created something new, the convention is to return 201. And as data, I will attach this created place. So I will return the created place here. To be precise, I'll return an object where I have a place property which holds that created place. Now with that, we got our middleware function, we got that connected to this route. The question is, how can we now send a request to it? Because if I now enter just /places/nothing, which would be the path that reaches this route, you'll see I actually get an error that this route is not found. The reason is that if you enter something in the browser URL, it by default always is a GET request, which means it can't work because we have no GET route that handles /nothing. We just have a POST route. To send a POST request, we could now set up some JavaScript code that sends it, for example. By the way, if you try that, it won't work, and I'll show you why later in the course. For the moment, I'll use a different tool though. I will use Postman. You can just Google for Postman and you'll find their official page. And Postman is simply a tool that allows you test or send requests to APIs. You can simply download the app from getpostman.com and simply walk through the installer that gives you and install it on your system. It's pretty straightforward. And then once you start this installed application, you will see a screen that looks something like this. You might also have like an overlay at the beginning, which asks you what you want to do. You can simply close that to be taken to this interface here. Now here in Postman, you can click this plus here, or new request, but that is a different form. We can simply use the plus here, which is simpler. And in there, you can choose the HTTP method of the request you want to send, in our case, post, and then the URL, which in our case is /localhost:5000/API/places/nothing, but you can omit that last slash as well. You could then add perms, which should be added as query perms, so with such a question mark at the end, which we don't need here. Authorization, which we don't need at the moment. Other headers, which we also don't need at the moment. And a body. And here on body, click raw, and then here choose JSON to add JSON data. And now valid JSON data looks like this. You add curly braces here. And now all the properties we're trying to extract here in our request or in our middleware from the request body. And of course named exactly like this because you are trying to extract them by that name. So here I will add a title, Wall Street Exchange. I'll add a description. Double quotes are important here, by the way. Single quotes won't work. Description, where the money lives. Creator, for now I'll say U2 here. We can invent any IDs here because we have no users anyways. Also the address, and I'll again get that from Google Maps, simply searching for Wall Street there for the Wall Street exchange in the end, but you can pick any location you want, of course. So for the New York Stock Exchange to be precise, let's also name it New York Stock Exchange. Address is this here, and then here we have a coordinates property because I'm trying to extract coordinates here, which in turn needs to have a let and a lng key in its nested object. So this is actually a nested object with more curly braces, and there we have let, and I'll again get that from Google Maps. This is a number, not between double quotes. You can also have numbers here. You don't need to have everything as a string. Just as you can have a nested object, you can also have a number here. And LNG is also taken directly from Google Maps and has this value. Now let's click send here, and we'll send the request to our backend. And there, indeed, this doesn't look too shabby. We get back a response, and it looks like we created that place. We can also validate that by sending a request to API/places/user u2, which is the creator ID I just used, and I find the New York Stock Exchange here. Now, important, this data at the moment only lives in memory. Whenever we restart this server here, by closing it and restarting, for example, or whenever we change something in code, when it's automatically restarted, that data will be lost. If I load that same page again, it will not find that place. Because when we store it here in a JavaScript array, it is only stored in memory. Now later, of course, we'll add a database and store it in a persistent way. For the moment, this dummy in-memory storage will do, just so that you don't wonder when it's suddenly lost. Of course, you can always recreate it by sending this request again. We can also test the GET requests here, by the way. We can also send a GET request from inside Postman to send a GET request to localhost 5000/API/places, and then, for example, the place with the ID P1. And we'll get the same response we saw in the browser before. And indeed, from now on, I will use Postman to have all the testing in one place, but for GET routes, you can also stick to the browser if you prefer that. Now, with that, we're able to create a place, and we're using Postman to test it. One thing is missing in our place, though, and that's an ID. And for that, I want to create a unique ID, which I'll do with an extra third-party package. So I'll quit this development server and run npm install --save, and then the package name is UUID. This is a package which is capable of generating unique IDs. Thereafter, we can restart this with npm start. And now here in the controller's file, I will import UUID by requiring. And now there, we don't just require UUID, but there are different versions, and that simply are different kinds of IDs it generates. And I'll use v4, which is a unique ID that also has a timestamp component in it. So here, we then call UUID as a function. This generates such a unique ID and stores it here in that ID field. With that, if I save this again, and I create my place again here, you see I get back that place, and that's the unique ID which was generated. And now we can also send a GET request to HTTP localhost 5000/places/this ID. And as long as we didn't restart the server in between, we should get this. Of course, it should be /API/places here. Now we get this. So this is now working, and we're able to send post requests and also GET requests with the help of Postman and also with the help of our unique ID here.